Well, it's about time that I get off my duff and actually review this record. I've been putting off this review for a little bit because I wanted to continue to listen to this record, and I find once I put out a review, I kind of, pump the brakes on listening to an album just so I can continue to listen to other albums that I want to review. So, yeah, this is me putting the pause on the play button so I can actually get out this review. So, let's dive into it. Black Medium Current by Dødheimsgard, and I believe that's how you pronounce it. Dødheimsgard, or from this point on, I'm just going to be considering them of DHG, because that's kind of how they notify it. They are a Norwegian extreme metal band. I kind of put them in the vein of like black metal, avant-garde metal, very similar to bands like Dune from a couple of years ago. Their one album was my favorite record of 2021. It has a lot of that same kind of flavors. We've got the blast beats, that really intense singing style, the growls, the screaming, the yelling, the fast playing, picking, fast, intense, that's being surrounded by a beautiful melodic, almost like post-rock, post-punk, industrialized styles of music. Avant-garde metal is kind of a good summarization of this. They're not 100% just blast down the doors insanity. There's a lot of clarity and a lot of much more clean and very accessible music kind of surrounding it. Deaf Heaven is another one that kind of comes to mind in this kind of style, although less post-rock and much more avant-garde rock, I guess would be the best way to put it. Anyway, this is their 7th full-length album, and this is the first time I've heard about them, but yeah, they've been on the scene since about the mid-90s, which is kind of crazy if I think about it. And as with any band that's been around for over 30 years, there's a bit of a rotating door, a roster of individuals, but now we've left with 4 individuals, one individual that's kind of been there since the beginning. Oh boy, where do I even start? So the one thing that I will notice is that the lead vocalist, his vocals, man, he has a commanding voice, and because most of this is in Swedish, he's kind of got this very interesting operatic approach to a growling technique, and this is something that I noticed earlier this year from the band The World Is Quiet here. There's this kind of playing around with this kind of harsh vocals. It almost has like a Rammstein kind of flavor to it in that sense. There's this, as I mentioned, very operatic approach to it that I just feel very infectious about, that I feel very invested in. So let's get into the music. Let's actually get into the nitty-gritty. The album opens up with Et Smelter, and this track is one of the longest ones at about 10 minutes and 20 seconds. It does a brilliant and perfect way of opening up the album itself. It provides the variety of the music that we're going to be having on this record. There's a lot of ebbs and flows on it. It never wants to sit still. It always has something new to try out, something new to play with. What I love is within the ebbs and flows, they know how to set something up and then pay it off, specifically at the big climax of this track, where we have this really big crescendo, and then it kind of tapers back a little bit. That starts with this new root on the song that then builds up and builds up and builds up. And man, I love that synthesized sound that we have at the ending of this. And this was when I knew I had something really interesting and really fun to play with. And I love hearing how they orchestrate sounds, how they orchestrate movements on here, because it isn't just blast down the door beats all the time. It's got this really enriched flavor within their soundscapes. I just wish that the rest of the album hit as hard as that first track does, because I don't really feel as though the rest of the album has that same kind of oomph that the first one does. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that the rest of the album is complete write-off. It's got a brilliant ebb and flow, like the second track of Tankirpian's Samirti? The second track has everything that I want with this style of black metal, where it starts off with that blast beat. It's just unrelenting. It hits you over the head over and over and over again. It brings you to the brink, right? And just when you think, oh, come on, guys, let's get something else, they slow it right down and they enter into this very beautiful cacophony. I'm loving the harmonizations that we have within the vocal works on here that's being blended within the synths. It's not just the guitar-leaded sounds that orchestrate the music within this, There's a lot of overlay and production work that we find on here. And it leads to a brilliant crescendo by the end of this track. You know, I love the build. I love the payoff on here. Once we get back to the blast beats of that heavy metal, it's well earned, and it provides a really beautiful crescendo. And what I also love is that they use the momentum from the one track to push open into the next one, like Interstellar Nexus. I love how it opens up into almost like this dance style of tracks. Like, this is the one that I think blurs the genres the most, because we have this intense, almost EDM style of music that, like, I feel like I'm getting into like deconstruction from Devin Townsend, where we've got these really strange soundscapes. It's very menacing. It's very off kilter. You know, you've got the strumming on the guitar that adds this haunted aspect to it, with the lead vocalist just kind of like it's just so interesting and so grating in that sense. The fourth track of It Does Not Follow, I feel is a little bit of a non sequitur on here. You know, the first three tracks at least follow a very linear line, even within all their ebbs and flows. When we get into It Does Not Follow, it feels like, I don't know, we've entered into a little bit more of an accessible traditional rock track at the very beginning. But from there, this track goes all over the place. There's a lot of different nooks and crannies within it. There's a lot of different aspects to it that I really love checking out. So yeah, it's very interesting that a track that opens up in a very accessible, very, I don't know, radio-friendly aspect turns out to be one of the more brutal tracks on here. Like, I love near the mid-track where the guitars are shredding singular notes, and it's providing this intense blast beats. And over top of it, we have the singing styles that kind of grate and follow against it. And I love this kind of blending, and how we got here from the beginning. I still kind of rack my brain. I'm like, wow, we really took the long way around. So that kind of concludes the first half, with Voyager being a little bit of a interlude track before we get into Hollow. And I love how smooth Hollow is. Each of these tracks kind of focuses on a different dynamic of the band and really showcasing what this band can do. And I love how, as I mentioned, how smooth Hollow is. It's got this really interesting kind of groove. It feels like you're on like this boat in the waves and whatnot. The seventh track of Tet Tom Keld Mork, I think is how you pronounce it. Again, another really blast beats song. It's got this really hard-hitting aspect of it. This is something that I really enjoy, in that, yeah, there's a lot of blast beats. There's a lot of different coverage of landscapes that we've had before, but I'm loving the small use of the synthesizer on this one. Like, I'm really loving the soundscapes that they're providing on here. It's just kind of peppered in with the song every once in a while that I really do appreciate, and I really like that different kind of a flavor on it. And this brings us to the biggest track on the album, the almost 11-minute track of Abyss Beryllium Transit. And oh boy, like, talk about a progressive metal track. This one goes all over the place. I love the ebbs and flows within it. I love the build-ups. I love the payoffs. The only thing that I will say, though, is unlike the other big track of Smelter, the opening track, I feel as though the playout of this track doesn't really lead to anything. I was kind of hoping for like a really brilliant breakdown aspect. It felt like they were setting up for a really brilliant breakdown, but it just kind of feels like a little bit more of a play out rather than a breakdown. And I mean, that's fine. Not all tracks have to be the blow down the doors intensity that it is, but it just felt a little bit lackluster by the end. Even though I still enjoyed it, it felt like it was more of a play out in that sense. But what I did enjoy, much like the latter half of this album that I've been talking around, is the different soundscapes that we have on here, that synth on here that I just can't get my teeth out of. Like, as much as I love the guitar works on here, as much as I love that chugging aspect of it, it's really all these smaller moments that I just cannot help but love. And then finally, we get to the final track of Requiem Aeternum, and it is basically just a play out. It is a closing track. It does what it needs to do. It's the shortest singular track. You know, I kind of figure Voyager is more of an interlude rather than a full-on track, but yeah, it's the slowest one. It's a play out. It's heart-wrenching. It's very, very good, and that services the album as a closer. So yeah, in the end, I have been having a blast with this record, and trying to like tear myself away from it long enough that I can actually sit down and review it was a task. It was a task. I felt like I really needed to get into all the different nooks and crannies, because boy, does this album have a lot of it. In terms of like drawbacks, I think the only thing I would say is it does feel its length. You know, it's an hour and 10 minutes long, and it does feel that length. For some people, they're going to enjoy it and they won't really, it won't matter all that much. But I feel as though we probably could have trimmed off maybe about 10 minutes of music on here, or at least like conglomerated 2 of the tracks into one bigger one, just to kind of have a little bit of a better like full sit down listening aspect of it, because it does feel its length. I wouldn't say it's too long, but what I will say is it feels the length of it. But that's really the only, for lack of a better term, criticism that I have on this. Otherwise, this is a fantastic record, one of the best metal records that I've heard this year, one that I would highly, highly recommend checking out. And I will say, Black Medium Current from Dødheimsgard is one that I would absolutely pick up in physical format. This is one that I would have in your collection if you're a fan of this style of black metal, if you like that more experimental side of things. I think you're really going to like this one. I think you're really going to get a kick out of it. And if you're kind of hesitant in terms of like the metal genre, but you love progressive music, this might be a good starting point. It does have that harsh vocals, it does have the blast beats, but this might be something that kind of eases you into it. So yeah, that's what I've got for Black Medium Current from Dødheimsgard. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And I think that's all I've got for you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.